Hello, you wonderful people. I've already talked about it before. I really like JRPGs. I literally just recorded a video talking about JRPGs. I kind of wanted to go down a different route in this video, and that's random encounters. Like, it's kind of interesting to me because I'm wondering, are there going to be kids that grow up that will never know like random encounter JRPGs? And I use them specifically because they're the only games that kind of have that system. Because typically, not always, but typically with JRPGs, the whole thing is like, oh, you get into a battle, you go into a new screen and stuff like that. So that transitioning thing might not be something a lot of people, because that's something that comes and goes. It depends on the game and the situation like that. Some games have gotten to the point where it's like you don't really transition to a new screen, you actually fight there. Like one example is like the Tale of Zestiria. I don't remember if Berseria is like that too or not. It might be. I want to say it's like a slight scene transition, but maybe, like I said, I don't remember. I want to say there might have been, but nevertheless. So if you don't know what I'm talking about with the whole random encounter situation, like technically I guess there's random encounters all over JRPGs, but in particular it's the old school fashion of like, oh, you're running and you're walking and then all of a sudden you get into a battle. Whereas like there's the whole aspect of random encounters in the sense of there's enemies on the field that if you want to initiate a battle, all you have to do is run into the enemy. Because it's a form, like random encounters, because that running into the enemies on the field, I don't know, there might be an actual titling for that, but random encounters is just what I've always heard as being the term for like when there's just random battles, like you're running and then screen transition and you're in battle. Like a lot of Final Fantasies kind of had that up until 10 was the last, well, 10-2 probably, yeah, 10-2 is probably the last one I'm aware of that had that, but I'll kind of dive into that in a second. But getting into it, like I was saying, like, because random encounters is one of those things people kind of don't like, just because it's just kind of, it gets a little annoying because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a JRPG, so you're going to fight a lot, but at the same time, it's just kind of like a hassle. Always like, oh, I'm in battle, I don't want to fight, just rather run. And like, you know, enemies being on a field allows you, for one, to fight whenever you feel like. You can grind whenever you feel like. For one, it also makes grinding a little easier. You don't have to run in circles, you know exactly where the enemies are and stuff, you can go right to them and stuff like that. But the random encounters, because it kind of messes the flow, because you're just like, because some games have a higher random enemy encounter rate than others. Like, it depends on the game too, so how annoying it is. I'm sure there's actually an algorithm built into every game to kind of go like, okay, when you're in this area, probably depending on your level, the enemy levels, like how fast and how often you're going to be getting into encounters and stuff like that. Like I said, it's like the whole random encounter thing, I have not seen it in a long time. The last game that I'm aware of, that at least that I've played that had it, was Lost Odyssey, I want to say. Is the last one I've played that did that. But everything else has transitioned. Like the Final Fantasy series has kind of done that interesting thing where, I mean, because obviously like with 12, the way the battle system was, like the enemies were already there on the field. The same thing for 13. 12, you didn't have like, you know, you got in battle mode and stuff like that, sure, but there was no like transition in that. But 13, there was a transition. 15 kind of does its thing too, because it does a similar thing to 12 where it's like the enemies are just out there in the field. There are some that just randomly spawn in, so it technically counts as a random encounter, but there's still like the whole like, they're there to fight if you want. If you don't, you can just like run past them. So, but enemies do tend to pop in, so like 15 is kind of a weird example because it blends both of them. But a great example would be like the Tales of series. The Tales of series has progressed. Like, I don't remember what the last Tales of, because I'm not that familiar with the Tales of series. I've only played a few of them, but like the ones I did play were mainly random encounters. But then like later ones, I want to say Vesperia, I could be 100% wrong, was like one of the first ones I'm aware of that didn't do that anymore. And I don't think subsequently since they have not gone back to like random encounters, like I said, because I think it's a dying thing. And that's why I'm like, probably in like, if you, unless you play an older RPG, that will probably be something no one will ever have experience with, you know? Because it's actually kind of interesting, because like, even, well, because it also depends on how the JRPG is built. Will probably determine a lot of that too, because it's like you take something like Kingdom Hearts, because Kingdom Hearts came out around the time, like, you know, a little bit after Final Fantasy came out, Final Fantasy X came out, which is interesting because like now in retrospect, it's like because of the way the game is designed, how like there's no scene transition into battle and stuff like that, you just fight enemies on the field, they have a tendency to spawn, and so it's kind of like that mixture of random encounters while not technically being random encounters, because it doesn't work the same way like Final Fantasy 15 is that little hybrid, so it's just kind of an interesting thing to me. Because other games that kind of fit that same situation is like the Persona series, for example, where it's like that's one of the earliest games that I'm aware of, or at least I can think of timeline-wise, that had enemies on the fields. I'm not saying it was the first one, but at the very least, it's one that kind of comes up to my mind. I mean, I'm not that well versed in the Persona series. I'm pretty sure, like, whatever, because I know there's like 2 different versions of 2. Because like they're 2 different stories. That's a whole thing, but like I think it had random encounters, but I think 3 was the one that kind of set the trend for the other ones, where it's like the enemies on the field. You know, I'm actually sitting here thinking about it. It's kind of interesting because Lost Odyssey was made by like Mistwalker. They also made Blue Dragon, which is interesting because like Blue Dragon does the whole enemies on the field thing, but Lost Odyssey didn't. I wonder what made them. I guess, you know, 2 different people. Like maybe the productions like were in that phase where they would start to phase that out. But because one of those games came out roughly around the same time, maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe just because of the aesthetics of the game, maybe they just wanted to kind of to distinguish them like even more so, like kind of how they operated battle-wise. Now, ultimately, my question to you guys is, what is your experience with random encounters? Like, did you grow up playing a lot of JRPGs and you played a lot with random encounters? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Or are you one of those people who have played a lot more modern JRPGs where like the enemies are on the field, so random encounters isn't something you're really that familiar with? Like I said, I know a lot of people in general, at least to what I've heard from people here and there, have like disdain for random encounters, but that's because that was a big part of their lives. I'm curious, from someone who's only ever played more modern JRPGs where the enemies are in the field, like how they would feel about random encounters, as well as like have they come across JRPGs where they have played the random encounters, and does that make them actually hate it more than someone who's dealt with it their entire life? It's kind of like if you dealt with your entire life, you're like, okay, it's just a thing, I don't really have much of a choice, it's just the way games are built, you know, at least at that time. I don't know, that's just kind of, like I said, stuff in my head. I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and